if the purpose of the impeachment is to remove a clear and present danger, but the danger has left the office, is no longer in any capacity to do harm, don't you just censure them rather than say, and you can never come back?
It's so insane. It's like, we insist you get off the train, but I'm off it. We absolutely insist you get off the train right now. I got off at the last station, mate. Well, we're going to take the train back and insist you get off it. I'm off the damn train. I've got off the train back there, right? It's all over. But, you know, when you see these lefties, it's taken less than a week for the true colours to come out. I mean, this is my views, I know some other views. Biden straight away, the pious Catholic has jumped in and saying he's going to basically be funding abortions overseas. That's one of his first decisions he's made. So much for the pious Catholic, that went out the window. Transgender people into the military. If you look in the background, all of the left agenda comes swimming in. And what I worry about is we need America to be strong, to be an absolutely strong bastion for our own protection here in Australia. And what I see here is he's just been absolutely run over by the radical left, and they are now running the United States of America, and that's a bad day for us.
Yeah, I mean, Nicholas, look, I get it. You know, no Trump fan, all the rest of it. But just as a bloke who, if apparently the problem with Trump was that all of these norms were being broken, what exactly is the justification for the removal of a bloke who's already left?
Well, I'm not sure Barnaby has been following the detail of the debate in the US, but the point to him being impeached is it means that he cannot run again for President of the United States. And the reason why
to the people to
run for President of the United States again
called democracy, Nicholas.
He was the worst president that ever had.
Don't think the American people can make that decision.
If he was,
don't think the American people can make that decision.
In terms of the actual claims against him and whether they justify impeachment, I think that's incontrovertible. I mean, he led an insurrection against the country which he was the commander-in-chief of.
That is
probably the most irresponsible act of a global leader that we have ever
seen. So you trust the Congress more than the American people to make that
decision. The weight of the case
is
incontrovertible, and the reason for doing it in terms of practical outcome is unarguable again, because the worst thing we want is for this guy to come back, because I actually agree with Barnaby on one point, and that is...
Well, let the American people decide that.
America, but
let the American people decide that.
Not stronger.
Oh, no. Nicholas agrees with you. This is what was called a rant. Can someone tell the news.com kidlets? This is what we heard just then. That's a rant. Not what Tony Abbott did. That wasn't a rant. What we just heard, absolute hysterical falsehoods stated as fact. That's a rant, and I think you could do a very nice clickbait argument around that.
Okay, well that's all the name calling you. You've got a substantive argument.
What Nick says is right about the evilness of Trump. If what Nick says is right, then surely you would give that right to the American people to make their decision. If that decision was to come about again, or you say the American people can't be trusted. All the American people are dopey. Only the Congress can make that decision, because that's where the left always goes. In the end, it's very Orwellian. It's like the only people who have the righteous position to make a judgment on power is the left themselves, and they of course bring in the left.
Well, Rita, I think Nick is hiding in plain sight here that he doesn't believe that Joe Biden got 80 million votes. Because the American people spoke.
By Nicholas's, I didn't think Nicholas was one of these election truthers who thought the election was fixed. But he's come out with this bold argument that the people can't be trusted, that Donald Trump could run and win again, and you can't have that happen because, God forbid, we allow democracy to take place. And anybody who uses the words coup or insurrection to describe what happened at the Capitol, you can't take those arguments seriously. This is first-year art student nonsense. And what Trump said, what he actually said was, people will march to the Capitol and protest peacefully. Now, if that is incitement to a coup, then I'm sorry, everyone on this panel is probably guilty of inciting a coup by something we've said. That is not incitement. I mean, we saw a summer of rioting. We saw absolute absolute destruction. We saw the left either ignore it or rationalise it. And you know what? Violence begets violence. When you allow that kind of conduct, don't be surprised if your ideological opponents also behave in that horrendous manner. I don't think it's difficult to unequivocally condemn violence and rioting. And I saw every Conservative commentator condemn what happened at the Capitol, but I didn't see leftist commentators condemn what we saw even on Inauguration Day by leftist protesters. We haven't seen them condemn all the BLM violence, all the Antifa violence. No, that's fine. That's called mainly peaceful protesting. Give me a bloody break.
Lawmakers weigh in on the impeachment trial's first day of debate. There are mixed views on the arguments they made.
On this vote, the ayes are 56, the nays are 44.
34 Republicans vote against proceeding with the impeachment trial against former President Trump, but the Senate majority wins the day. There's mixed reviews on how well the House impeachment managers and Trump's attorneys presented their arguments. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer giving high praise for House impeachment manager Jamie Raskin, calling his argument one of the most powerful he's ever seen.
He hit it out of the park. It was both erudite and touching. It really got to your heart.
Raskin argued that if the trial didn't go ahead, it would create a January exception. He said future presidents could abuse their power without fear of being convicted and barred from holding future office. Bruce Castor, one of Trump's attorneys, called this idea nonsense. Trump's attorneys tried to convince senators that the trial isn't constitutional. Representative Jim Jordan thinks they did a good job.
The President's counsel very strongly made the case for how this is not constitutional.
Senator Bill Cassidy disagrees.
And the House managers made a compelling, cogent case, and the President's team did not.
And for another senator, it was more balanced.
So I think that each side did a decent job. I don't think either side overwhelmed the other.
Castor responded to Raskin's argument, saying if Democrats actually think that President Trump committed a criminal offense, he's out of office. You go and arrest him. He says there is no opportunity where the President of the United States can run rampant in January at the end of his term and just go away scot-free. Republican senators say Tuesday's vote is a barometer for how many senators will vote to acquit the president when the trial is over. Senator Patrick Leahy, who is presiding over the impeachment trial, says he intends to conduct the proceedings with fairness to all. In a letter to his colleagues, he said he will adhere to the Constitution and to applicable Senate rules, precedent, and governing resolutions. Leahy is presiding over the trial in place of Chief Justice John Roberts, who turned it down. A shooting inside a Minneapolis area medical clinic kills one and puts 4 more in the hospital. The suspect is an elderly man believed to be a disgruntled former patient.
67-year-old Buffalo resident Gregory Paul Ulrich was arrested at the scene. Authorities described him as well known to law enforcement. According to Buffalo's police chief, investigators say the suspect acted alone, singling out the Allina Health Clinic in Buffalo, Minnesota, about 35 miles northwest of Minneapolis. The chief says Ulrich held a personal grudge against faculty or staff there. Court records say he was at one point ordered to have no contact with a man whose name matches that of a doctor at the clinic. Local health officials explained 5 people wounded by gunfire were taken to area hospitals. 1 later died. 3 others were listed in critical but stable condition. It's unclear whether they were patients or staff. Local media also reported an explosion 30 minutes after the shooting, citing emergency dispatch audio. But officials could not immediately confirm those reports. Bomb squad investigators examined a suspicious package at the clinic and another at the nearby motel where Ulrich stayed. The sheriff said the motel was evacuated as a precaution. Nearby schools were also placed under lockdown. Ulrich is scheduled to appear for arraignment on Thursday.
The Justice Department is beginning the process of replacing the federal prosecutors Trump appointed. This paves the way for President Joe Biden to install his own nominees to lead the U.S. attorney's offices across the country.
The Justice Department is asking U.S. attorneys Trump appointed to hand in their resignations, but two officials have not been asked to resign, including Delaware U.S. Attorney David Weiss, who's investigating Hunter Biden's taxes. The other is Special Counsel John Durham, who is investigating the origins of the counterintelligence probe into Trump and Russia. Press Secretary Jen Psaki says Biden wants to keep the DOJ free from any undue political influence. That's why Weiss and Durham are staying. Acting Attorney General Monty Wilkinson says until the U.S. attorneys are confirmed, acting attorneys will fill their roles. About a third of the U.S. attorneys' offices are led by acting leadership. Former presidents have asked U.S. attorneys to resign, but done so over a longer period of time. This process has been scrutinized, but former administrations argued it's a tradition for new presidents. Then President Trump asked 46 U.S. attorneys to resign when he took office in 2017. When the DOJ made the announcement, the Senate Judiciary Committee set a date for Merrick Garland's confirmation as Attorney General. That's 2 Mondays from now.
A law professor on Facebook's oversight board is joining Biden's Department of Justice. She's stepping down from the board to accept the position.
Stanford's Pamela Karlan will serve in the DOJ's Civil Division. She's moving on after spending less than a year on Facebook's oversight board. She said, "Working with my colleagues on the oversight board to build a fairer and more effective approach to content moderation has been an honor. The board has a critical role to play in holding Facebook to account." Karlan also helped with Biden's transition. She was listed as a volunteer on his DOJ agency review team, and you might have heard about her in the news before. In 2019, she testified at Trump's first impeachment trial. She made a joke at the expense of Trump's youngest son, Barron, who was only 13 at the time. She later apologized. And in 2009, the New York Times presented her as the favorite potential Supreme Court pick of the left. Her journey fits a pattern of revolving doors between Facebook and Democrat administrations. Last month, Facebook hired an Obama administration veteran, and at least 3 people on Biden's team used to work for Facebook, and they also held roles in the Obama administration. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg gave $500 million to election officials ahead of the 2020 election. The Thomas More Society's Amistad Project claims these grants favored Democrat areas and violated election laws.
More than 20 Republican senators are asking President Biden to reconsider one of his executive orders. They say it'll affect the transparency of federal agencies.
President Biden's order revokes one of his predecessors that tells federal agencies to publish guidance on how they interpret and apply regulations. Former President Trump's order had bipartisan support and is credited with reducing wasteful federal regulation. Biden canceled the order on his first day in office. Now a group of 21 Republican senators wrote a letter to Biden asking him to reconsider. They say there is no good reason to reverse the policy, writing, "Without explanation, you described this executive order as one of the harmful policies and directives that threaten to frustrate the federal government's ability to confront the COVID-19 pandemic, economic recovery, racial justice, and climate change." They note that Trump's order is based on popular legislation. The letter states that Biden's own Vice President, Kamala Harris, is on the record supporting it. The senators question why Americans subject to federal regulation should not have access to the policies they need to follow. The letter states, "It is simply wrong to believe that Americans are better off not knowing which and how federal rules and regulations apply to them. They want Biden to rescind this order or support the legislation Trump's order is based on."
A convicted sex offender is arrested, among others, by Border Patrol agents at a Texas border checkpoint. That's amid 2 failed human smuggling attempts using commercial vehicles. Juan Castro was arrested as part of the smuggler group. Authorities discovered that he was previously convicted of aggravated sexual assault. Border Patrol is now holding him, pending prosecution of his immigration violations. The first smuggling attempt took place on February 5th. Agents found illegal aliens inside of a tractor trailer that tried to cross a border checkpoint near Loretto. The next night, border agents found more illegal aliens inside another tractor trailer at the same border checkpoint. Agents arrested the drivers of the vehicles and the nearly 140 people found hiding inside the trailers. Democrats are proposing an addition to Biden's near $2 trillion pandemic relief package. It would give families thousands of dollars in child tax credits. NTD's Christina Kim speaks to a welfare expert about the proposal.
The new proposal would expand the child tax credit from the current $2,000 for each child under 17 up to $3,600 for every child under the age of 6. For children between the ages of 6 and 17, they would get $3,000 per child. If passed, the IRS would begin distributing this money in monthly paychecks over the course of a year starting in July. The proposal was introduced by Democratic Representative Richard Neal. For Americans making more than $75,000 per year or couples making more than $150,000 together, the benefit would diminish. Press Secretary Jen Psaki said the president would support this.
Money in the package that helps bring relief to families in the form of a child tax credit. It's something he certainly would support.
Poverty and welfare expert Robert Rector says these programs should help families in need, but the aid should be targeted.
Give them as much assistance as possible, but it needs to be temporary. It should be in temporary programs for the COVID problem.
Rector notes the pandemic shouldn't be a way to sneak in permanent changes into the welfare state. While this plan lasts 1 year, the Washington Post reports that Democrats and White House officials have said they want to push for this policy to become permanent later this year. Rector says the new proposal would eliminate work requirements out of most of the welfare system, which doesn't help people escape poverty. This restores welfare to the way it used to be. Rector calls this a large mistake.
Where preparation for getting a job is a key to getting those benefits. That system is very effective in helping people escape from poverty. Just giving them cash without requiring any activity on their part largely is going to trap them in poverty.
Rector points out that the current welfare system is already large.
We spend close to $500 billion a year providing cash, food, and housing and medical care to poor and low-income families. If you just took that and sort of distributed it, it would be enough to basically raise the income of every single low-income family to around $75,000 a year. It's an enormous amount of money.
Rector says this proposal would add nearly $80 billion in cash grants to the existing welfare money. He says we should seek to spend the existing money in a more effective way that lifts people out of poverty, promotes work, and supports married or dual-income households. Christina Kim, NTD News.
Donald Trump Jr. is preparing to campaign against Congresswoman Liz Cheney. He's heading to Wyoming to speak out against the Republican House member. Cheney is one of the 10 Republicans who voted to impeach former President Trump. She issued a scathing statement against the former president. Several Democrats used her remarks during the debate ahead of the impeachment vote. Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz traveled to Wyoming last month to rally against Cheney. He told a crowd that Cheney is part of an insider group in Washington that deals in power and seeks to enrich themselves. Trump Jr. called into the rally and spoke by phone. He encouraged the crowd to be patient in seeking out a replacement for Cheney so they don't split their vote. At least 2 Republicans have already declared their intention to run against Cheney in the 2022 Republican primary. California's Recall Governor Newsom grassroots movement is dashing to its finish line. With close to 1.5 million signatures collected as of this week, the campaign manager told NTD that it will come through in the next few weeks. NTD's Zach Lee has more.
With around 150,000 signatures received every week, Rescue California, the campaign aimed at removing Governor Gavin Newsom from office, said it will garner 1.5 million signatures by this Wednesday.
We just took the rate that we're going at. We'll hit the numbers that we need to hit.
The deadline for turning in all the signatures is March 17th, but Dunsmore said that at the current 82% validity rate, they will be able to get 1.8 million signatures before the deadline, meeting the 1.5 million minimum requirement. Dunsmore also said that the campaign has received 14,000 donations, with a total of $2.5 million. Dunsmore believes that it shows how Californians desperately want to make a change.
We have the highest taxes in the nation. We have the highest homeless rate in the nation. We have the highest jobless rate in the nation. These are not lists that anybody ought to be bragging about being number one on.
During the pandemic, Newsom has been criticized for visiting the French Laundry during his own stay-at-home order, keeping key data away from the public that justifies his abrupt lifting of the stay-at-home order, and the recently revealed EDD unemployment benefit scam, which may include up to $31 billion.
So that's 25% of California's annual budget. No one's lost their job. Gavin Newsom might lose his job. He should lose his job. Maybe he should resign before we recall him.
But Governor Newsom has been turning a blind eye to the recall, barely making any comments on the campaign. Several reports have said that the campaign is associated with far-right conspiracy theories.
And label this as a Trump movement or a white supremacist movement or coup, because you don't understand how they're feeling and how your lack of planned policies are impacting their life.
Dunsmore said that they have been sending out signatures to each county's registrar office for validation. After being verified, all of the signatures will be submitted to the state for a final count. If passed, a special election will be held around September. Reporting by Zach Lee, NTD News, Los Angeles.
A reporter asks U.S. State Department spokesman Ned Price if China provided appropriate access to the World Health Organization's team of investigators.
Well, I think the jury's still out. I think clearly the Chinese, at least heretofore, had not offered the requisite transparency that we need, and that just as importantly, again, the international community needs.
The WHO team is already saying it's extremely unlikely the virus came from the Wuhan virology lab. Former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo told Fox News that he does not believe them. He notes that the Trump administration withdrew from the WHO because the organization had become corrupted and politicized. He said it was bending a knee to General Secretary Xi Jinping in China. And still to come, vaccine chasers in California hunt down quicker ways to get vaccinated for the CCP virus and avoid the long appointment wait times. And a virtual court hearing gone wrong. You really won't want to miss this lawyer's arguments. That and more after the break.
유치원 폐쇄 명령서입니다.
전 폐쇄 명령 받아들일 수 없습니다.
유치원 폐쇄 명령이라.
좀 들어간 건 어떻게 됐어? 도저히 방법이 없대?
정일조 사장님을 대신해서 제가 대신 말씀드리면 안 되겠습니까?
The pilot in the January 2020 helicopter crash that killed retired NBA star Kobe Bryant, his daughter, and his 7 others was legally prohibited from flying into clouds, but did so anyway. The National Transportation Safety Board's chairman made the announcement on Tuesday.
It was a tragedy that perhaps could have been avoided. That was the conclusion by the National Transportation Safety Board, which cited the actions of the pilot as the probable cause of the January 2020 helicopter crash that killed retired NBA star Kobe Bryant, his daughter, and 7 others, explaining that the pilot became disoriented and did not follow rules for flying in cloudy weather. NTSB Chairman Robert Sumwalt.
He was flying under visual flight rules, or VFR, which legally prohibited him from penetrating the clouds. However, as we've seen in so many accidents, this pilot continued his VFR flight into clouds.
The NTSB cited pilot R. Zobayan's decision to continue to fly in unsuitable weather conditions as resulting in his, quote, spatial disorientation and loss of control.
We're talking about spatial disorientation, where literally the pilot may not know which way is up or down, whether he or she is leaning left or right.
Zobayan told air traffic controllers that his helicopter was climbing out of heavy clouds when in fact it was descending immediately before slamming into a hillside near the town of Calabasas in California. Zobayan was among those killed in the crash of the Sikorsky S-76B helicopter outside Los Angeles in hilly terrain. The NTSB said previously that an examination of the helicopter's engines and rotors found no evidence of catastrophic mechanical failure. 41-year-old Bryant, an 18-time NBA All-Star with the Los Angeles Lakers, was traveling with his 13-year-old daughter Gianna, 2 other girls, and several friends to a youth basketball tournament at the time of the crash. The accident prompted an outpouring of shock and grief from sports fans worldwide.
The FDA gives emergency use authorization for a new combination antibody drug. It's made by pharmaceutical company Eli Lilly, which says the drug can treat mild to moderate cases of the CCP virus.
Eli Lilly's combination antibody therapy to fight COVID-19 has been granted emergency use authorization in the United States. The company announced Tuesday its antibody drug had been authorized by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration after data from a late-stage trial in January showed it helped cut the risk of hospitalization and death in COVID-19 patients by 70%. Eli Lilly's therapy combines 2 antibodies, bamlanivimab and etesevimab, and is similar to the experimental medication touted by former U.S. President Donald Trump after he was hospitalized with COVID-19 last October. In a statement, the company said the therapy was authorized for the treatment of, quote, mild to moderate COVID-19 in patients aged 12 or older who are at high risk of progressing to severe COVID-19 and or hospitalization. But the FDA said the drug would not be authorized for patients who are already hospitalized due to COVID-19 or require oxygen therapy. Eli Lilly added that 100,000 doses would be ready immediately, and an additional 150,000 doses would be available throughout the first quarter. The company says they plan to manufacture up to 1 million doses by mid-2021 in collaboration with American biotech company Amgen. Last November, the FDA approved Eli Lilly's single antibody treatment.
Vaccine chasers in the Los Angeles area are on the hunt for leftover doses. They're hoping to get lucky at the end of the day when people cancel their appointments or don't show up.
68-year-old Jose Luis Espinoza was on the hunt to get his COVID-19 vaccine. He qualifies in California for a shot, but it hasn't been easy.
The appointments are so hard to get. I've been trying for over 3 weeks, and I just got one. It's saying true that it's going to be until the end of the month.
For Espinoza, that's too long to wait. So last week he went to a clinic in Santa Fe Springs, California, and waited in line with other so-called vaccine chasers. Those hoping to get lucky with a leftover shot at the end of the day when people cancel their appointments or don't show up.
I'm here in hopes that there's any that might be left over.
48-year-old Cynthia Perez was one of the first to arrive that day at the Santa Fe Springs clinic.
I have a compromised condition, but yet I'm not 65 yet. And then I also have a kid at home who has asthma, so I'm trying to kind of maybe get ahead of the curve a bit and try and stay healthy myself.
Chasers have been criticized for getting the vaccine when it's not their turn, but Perez says that's not her intention.
So I'm not trying to jump the line per se, I'm just trying to take advantage of any vaccines or any doses that might be thrown away.
Thank you.
Will Baker agrees. He is assisting with vaccinations at the Santa Fe Springs clinic and stresses the importance of not wasting any precious doses and welcomes people to wait. And on this day, there was one extra dose.
We had one shot left over. I went over the guidelines and I looked for anyone in the line that was 1A, and we did have one person in the line that met the 1A criteria, and we were able to get him a vaccine to take.
And that lucky vaccine chaser was Espinoza.
Fortunately, it was the last dose they gave out. It was the last, and I was the lucky one.
Baker went outside to break the bad news to the rest of the group.
I'm sorry, there's no more vaccine for today. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you.
Sorry about that, everyone.
Perez picked up her bag and headed home, disappointed but not deterred.
I mean, you can't be upset. It's never guaranteed. So, we'll see.
Deaths from drugs like fentanyl surged on the West Coast last year, but the source of it most likely isn't the usual suspect. NTD's Daniel Hall in California has more.
Fentanyl overdose deaths saw a sharp increase along the West Coast in the first half of 2020. According to CDC data, synthetic opioid-related deaths in Oregon, Washington, and California have increased every month since the fall of 2019. California saw over 2,500 deaths from fentanyl-like drugs in June 2020. A researcher at the University of Washington described the opioid epidemic as a wave. When asked how to interpret the 98% increase in fentanyl deaths in the 10 western states, Caleb Banter-Green said the influence is sweeping from the East Coast to the West Coast. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid and is cheap to produce in large quantities. It is 50 times more potent than heroin. While much of it is smuggled in from countries south of the border, they are not responsible for most of the production. According to a 2018 report, China is the largest producer of illicit fentanyl. The Chinese Communist Party has done little to nothing to stem the production and export of fentanyl. Daniel Hall, NTD News, California.
A virtual court proceeding in Texas got off to an odd start on Tuesday. You could say one of the lawyers had trouble presenting himself. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the story.
Mr. Ponton, I believe you have a filter turned on in the video settings. You might want to
can you hear me, Judge?
I can hear you. I think it's a filter.
It is, and I don't know how to remove it. I've got my assistant here. She's trying to, but...
Texas Judge Roy Ferguson was surprised when he opened up virtual proceedings on Zoom on Tuesday. He was not expecting to see two lawyers and a kitten. The cute blue-eyed feline is actually County Attorney Rod Ponton, covered by a filter.
I'm here live. I'm not a cat. And when everybody's ready, the judge calls the case, and everybody's face is supposed to pop up on Zoom. We've all done it. And everybody's face popped up except mine. Mine was a cat.
Ponton said his assistant was trying to fix the settings. As the video went viral on social media, Ferguson tweeted, "Important Zoom tip. If a child used your computer, before you join a virtual hearing, check the Zoom video options to be sure filters are off." The 69-year-old Ponton told Reuters he wasn't sure how the filter got there.
Well, if it's gone out and it's gone viral, let it go. Just have to roll with it. You know, it happened to me. I can't deny it. You know, I hope everybody can get a little chuckle at my expense today.
Turned on in the video.
Judge Ferguson called it a fun moment. He helped remove the filter and the hearing proceeded. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Can you hear me, Judge?
I can hear you. I think it's a filter.
And just ahead, a new bill aiming to stop members of China's regime and its military from entering the U.S. The WHO echoes Chinese officials on the CCP virus, and the regime's ambassador blames the U.S., claiming it's where the virus began. That and more after the break.
Someone has to find a way to build the Great Dome completely new, completely original.
90% of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. They're not out to tell you the truth of what's happening. They're out to tell you the picture of the world that they represent. The mission of the Epoch Times is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in facts, and prevent people from being misled. This is a battle between truth and deceit. Subscribe today and join the Americans who are seeking truth and tradition. We'd love to have you on board.
China's ambassador is echoing a Beijing claim that the CCP virus might come from the U.S. This, as the World Health Organization experts start repeating their Chinese counterparts' talking points. NTD's Tiffany Meyer has more.
Apparent similarities between comments from Chinese officials and World Health Organization experts. Top Chinese health authority Lian Wannian said Tuesday the virus could have been circulating in other regions before it was identified in Wuhan at the end of 2019. In a joint press briefing with the WHO, he said there had been no substantial spread of the virus in the central Chinese city before the late 2019 outbreak. WHO virus expert Peter Ben Emmerich spoke during the same conference, dismissing the possibility of a laboratory leak as extremely unlikely. He pointed again to a, quote, natural reservoir in bats, but it's unlikely that they were in Wuhan. A WHO lead team of experts has been in Wuhan for more than 3 weeks, spending the first 2 in quarantine. Members visited Wuhan's virology lab for 3 hours last week as part of an arranged tour set up by the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP. Emmerich said the team had identified market vendors selling frozen animal products. His words echo the CCP's narrative that the virus can be transmitted by frozen food. For months, the CCP has repeatedly claimed findings of CCP virus traces on imported food packaging, including chicken, beef, seafood products, and even ice cream. But a Chinese food security official said in January that in China there have been no reported cases of people contracting the virus through purchasing or handling frozen food. While WHO experts are visiting Wuhan, China's ambassador to the U.S. reiterated Beijing's conspiracy that the CCP virus may have originated from the U.S. Ambassador Cui Qiankai suggested this in an interview with CNN over the weekend. The CCP virus is widely believed to have originated from Wuhan, China, but researchers worldwide are still unclear about exactly when and how the virus first started. Cui also brushed aside theories claiming the virus originated from either a wet market or lab in Wuhan. This isn't the first time the Chinese regime has sought to blame the U.S. for causing the pandemic. In March last year, the CCP's foreign ministry spokesperson accused the U.S. Army of bringing the virus to Wuhan during a military sports event in 2019. Last month, the U.S. State Department says it had reason to believe several researchers at the Wuhan Institute of Virology fell ill with CCP virus-like symptoms in the fall of 2019. The institute, however, says there was zero infection among lab members. Other than the U.S., the CCP has also accused Italy, Spain, India, and Norway of being the origins of the virus. For a brief moment in recent history, Communist China enjoyed freedom of speech. It came in the form of an app called Clubhouse. The app is a social networking forum and allows for open conversations among users. The app doesn't censor content, doesn't record users' conversations, and provides a degree of privacy for users. The feature drew increasing interest among Chinese users. Topics usually forbidden by the Chinese web censors flourished on the app. Conversations skyrocketed about Hong Kong's freedom, Taiwan's sovereignty, and the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre, and the suppression of the Uyghur minority in Xinjiang. But the burst of free expression was short-lived. Chinese authorities got wind of the app, banning it on Monday. The app may be blocked now, but Chinese netizens enjoyed it while it lasted. The hashtag #ClubhouseBlocked trended on one of China's largest social media platforms, Weibo, soon after. Clubhouse is a US-based app, but it may also partly use Chinese technology, as engineers have discovered some traces of it in the app.
In a leaked recording from China, a local official orders police to beat petitioners with no mercy. This is a way to prevent citizens from expressing grievances to authorities. NTD's Yi Ru has more.
In some places, the police fail to prevent petitioners from sending their complaints because they say they can't beat the elderly, or people with disabilities, or people with high blood pressure, or pregnant women, and so on. I tell you, you must beat them, and beat them with no mercy. I'll take responsibility if they die.
A leaked recording reveals comments from the former head of one city's petition bureau in Hulunbuir City inside China's Inner Mongolia region. It shows then bureau head Dong Shimin instructing police and public security officers on how to deal with petitioners. Petitioners are people in China who think they've been treated unfairly by authorities and haven't been able to get their grievances addressed by the judicial system. In Communist China, the judicial system is under the control of the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP. This is why some of them go to local petition bureaus to file their complaints, but most of the cases are left unresolved. The leaked recording was captured in August 2019 during a local conference on maintaining stability in the city. In his speech, Dong criticized police officers who dare not punish petitioners. Dong said all petitioners must be detained. After a 10-day detention, they will be made to write so-called repenting statements and promise to never send any further complaints. He added that once petitioners are sentenced to prison, they will be obedient. He called it an effective way of dealing with them. Dong was promoted to the head of the city's judicial bureau last year. Chinese petitioner Ms. Liu said this approach is used by the CCP nationwide. That's why officials dare to beat petitioners, illegally detain them, and even beat them to death. To protect her identity, we're only using her surname. In fact, in every petition bureau, public security bureau, and stability maintenance organization across the country, officials basically behave the same way. Canada-based Chinese lawyer Lai Jianping says, by nature, the regime will work to suppress all human rights defenders.
Communist Party officials want to get promoted and make money, so they implement the party's policies and carry out the orders issued by the authorities.
Lai says the CCP maintains its tyranny by enslaving its people. With the regime's support, Dong and other officials are able to treat petitioners ruthlessly and face no consequences. Reporting by Yi Wu, NTD News.
A new bill in Congress is aiming to stop intellectual property theft by the Chinese Communist regime. It will ban senior Chinese Communist Party members from entering the U.S.
Republican Congresswoman Debbie Lesko reintroduced a bill on Monday called Stop China's IP Theft Act. The bill aims to ban visas to the U.S. for senior Chinese Communist Party or CCP members, regime officials, active members of the regime's People's Liberation Army or PLA, and their family members. Congresswoman Lesko believes the bill is necessary because the U.S. cannot continue to tolerate China's attempt to steal American intellectual property. She says the bill is critical in combating the global threat posed by the CCP. If the bill is passed, the ban on visas for CCP and PLA members will be in effect until the Director of National Intelligence certifies that the CCP has stopped sponsoring, funding, and actively working to infringe on U.S. intellectual property. Congresswoman Lesko first introduced the bill last November. This time, 7 other Republican Congress members co-sponsored the new bill.
Up next, business owners react to a potential $15 an hour federal minimum wage law. They say it's too expensive and would end in fewer jobs. And Apple sees reduced demand for its small screen phones. Analysts think the tech company might stop making smaller versions of its phones altogether. Find out more when we come back.
When you look at TV networks in America, a soundbite and prided-out culture prevails on news and commentary programs. As a Canadian, I'm fascinated with America, and I wanted to offer American thought leaders an opportunity to share their thoughts in a deep dive format where we can explore their ideas together. And so American Thought Leaders was born. The world's most brilliant thinkers believed that open discourse was the key to greatness. However, all around the world, we see that discourse is being stifled, and political agendas have subverted media. The Epoch Times launched its Global Thought Leaders program to bring back this great tradition of free thought. As the host of American Thought Leaders, every week I interview some of the most intriguing minds on the most pressing issues of our time. Be sure to check out our new episodes every week.
President Biden is promising to mandate a $15 minimum wage nationwide. But what are the implications of a policy like this? Here's our latest financial and business news on jobs and the economy.
Independent restaurant owners from across the country assess what a $15 minimum wage law could mean for their businesses.
Listen, we've been working so hard to keep all of these people employed. We won't be able to anymore because of just seating restrictions and comfort levels. We have the least diners we've ever had. And to have this pay increase at that time, it would be impossible. So I'd have to lay off people.
In the forum hosted by the Heritage Foundation, Leroy says she would love to be able to pay her workers more, but now is not the right time. Another restaurant owner in New York also agrees. A $15 minimum wage would have devastating results for the restaurant industry.
In New York City, the tip minimum wage went from $5 an hour to $10 an hour within just a few years, which represents a 100% increase in labor costs. When this happened, we had no choice but to cut back hours and some jobs entirely.
Coteen says restaurants provide people without a college education the opportunity to move into the middle class. But if restaurants have to cut entry-level jobs, that opportunity will be gone for many people.
There was an article in the New York Times not long ago about how it used to be factory jobs that would bring you to the middle class. Those don't really exist anymore. So this is one of the very few industries left that can afford you a middle class income without a college education.
Co-host of the forum, Rachel Gressler, says that due to variations in costs of living in different parts of the country, a nationwide $15 minimum wage increase will have many unexpected consequences.
And it's one thing when New York City or LA or these high-cost areas implement the $15 minimum wage because people can go elsewhere to find work if they've lost it. But it's a different story when you do it nationwide.
Gressler adds that minimum wage hikes will also lead to companies automating jobs. Workers will be replaced by self-checkout kiosks or tablets.
Beer maker Heineken announces a plan to cut about 8,000 jobs. The group is trying to restore operating margins to pre-pandemic levels. That's after a sharp profit decline because of CCP virus restrictions. The world's second largest brewer said it would make $2.42 billion of savings over the next 3 years. Heineken said it would achieve the savings goal by redesigning its organization, reducing product complexity and variety, and identifying inefficient spending. The operations review would result in about 8,000 job losses. That equates to 9% of its workforce at the end of 2019. The company said it wants superior top-line growth and would push its premium brands like Heineken and its zero-alcohol lager even more. It also aims to better serve customers online. Is Washington State about to steal from the rich to give to the poor? Amazon founder Jeff Bezos might have to pay $2 billion a year in state taxes if it passes a proposed wealth tax. NTD's Tom Ozimek has more.
Some Washington state lawmakers want to impose a 1% tax on the state's wealthiest residents. Jeff Bezos' net worth is estimated at around $200 billion. That would mean he'd owe $2 billion a year. State Representative Noelle Frame sponsored the bill. She says the state's Department of Revenue estimates the tax would bring in around $2.5 billion a year by taxing some 100 billionaires. She says it's not clear if the estimate includes Bezos, since he might no longer be a resident of Washington state. The Tax Foundation found that only about a dozen people would be liable for the tax, and just 4 people would account for around 97% of the revenue the tax would generate. Besides Bezos, the 3 other mega-billionaires that would face the brunt of the tax are Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates, Bezos' ex-wife Mackenzie Scott, and former Microsoft CEO Steve Ballmer. Lawmakers in New York and California have also proposed wealth taxes. President Joe Biden has rejected taxing wealth on an annual basis, but he has proposed raising taxes on accumulated wealth at death. Tom Ozimek, NTD News.
The European police agency Europol says it helped arrest 10 hackers suspected of stealing $100 million in cryptocurrency. It was done by illegally gaining control of cell phone SIM cards. Europol said in a statement that the hackers targeted thousands of victims throughout 2020. Among them were internet celebrities, sports stars, and musicians. In SIM-swapping attacks, criminals gain control over the small computer chip that carries a phone number used to identify a customer. A phone company is tricked into deactivating a working SIM and transferring its functions to the one controlled by the hackers. Europol advises the public not to use services that use text messages to help log into online accounts. Sales of the iPhone 12 mini in the US were just a small fraction of total sales of its new phones in early January. Analysts even speculate it could lead Apple to scrap production of the mini.
When it comes to smartphones, a recent look at iPhone sales showed that bigger really is better, at least in buyers' eyes. U.S. sales of the recently launched iPhone 12 mini were just 5% of all sales of new Apple phones during the first half of January, according to data provider Counterpoint. The report is adding to signs of muted demand for the mini version of the beloved device. Last quarter, Apple smashed iPhone sales records, raking in nearly $66 billion for its flagship device. Apple launched the Mini as a way of covering all price points in the smartphone battle, but larger devices have proved to be more popular as consumers increasingly use their mobile devices to devour more video content on the go from a wide array of streaming video services, as well as binge on visually rich social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat. Lackluster demand for smaller screens is not an Apple issue alone. As an analyst at JP Morgan pointed out, global data show sales of devices with sub-6-inch screens only make up 10% of all smartphones sold. There is some speculation by analysts that demand for the smaller iPhone 12 and the Mini are so weak that might lead Apple to scrap production of the Mini as early as the spring. Apple was not immediately available to comment.
Up next, Oxford University is renaming a prestigious professorship after a Chinese software company for a £700,000 donation. And a French mayor is defying the country's lockdown rules and allowing museums to reopen. Stay tuned to find out more.
Trends may be fleeting, but values are timeless. We now bring you this new clothing brand with classic design and luxurious comfort. It's our way of sharing hope and inspiration from the world of Shenyun. We bring you Shenyun Dancer. Wear it with honor.
The British Consulate General has been informed that Hong Kong, like other parts of China, does not recognize dual nationality.
Based on UK government travel advice, dual nationality citizens may be treated as a Chinese citizen by local authorities even if they enter Hong Kong on a British passport. That means the British Consulate General may not be able to offer any consular assistance. Just before warning the UK, the Hong Kong government halted international diplomats from offering assistance to Chinese dual citizens with foreign passports who had been arrested or detained in the city in certain cases. There are hundreds of thousands of dual Chinese nationals in Hong Kong. Until now, they were able to work in the city while maintaining family links overseas and vice versa. The warning brings new uncertainty to their lives.
Oxford University is to rename a prestigious professorship of physics after Tencent, a Chinese software company, for a £700,000 donation.
According to the Daily Mail newspaper, the university's Wykeham Chair of Physics will be renamed the Tencent Wykeham Chair of Physics. The professorship was established in 1900 and is named after William of Wykeham, the bishop who founded New College in the 14th century. Tencent is accused of having close links with the communist regime in China. According to the CIA, Tencent was founded with state support and financing from China's Ministry of State Security. Tencent also owns the app WeChat.
In France, the media is reporting an increase in the number of squatters. Entities
In June 2019, Gregory Deck's life took a turn. His house in
Deep inside, there's a flame that